Yo, what's good YouTube? It's Sportsy, and I say a lot of videos are shocking, but this one is more. This is monumental. This is going to be the updated 2022 Ultimate All-Encompassing Gaming Mouse tier list. But not only is it an update, we have cracked the threshold of 100 mice on the tier list. And I have posted full reviews for all of these mice. So if you want more detail about a specific mouse, you can just find the video on my channel. All I ask for in honor of the 100 mice is 100 likes and 100 new subscribers. And yeah, I'm just going to get right into the tier list. First off, we have the Booga Mouse, which, to nobody's surprise, has not moved out of dog shit since the last tier list. This thing is still terrible, but what has changed is they made a Booga Mouse 2, which is equally as bad, if not worse. It's interesting to see a company make another product that is just not, like, changed at all. It's just a different shape, but everything else is still equally as bad. So, Booga Mice, no good. Next up, we have the Bloody A7, and this is going to go into our dog shit and Minecraft tier. So we're putting Minecraft mice in a tier of their own, which is also the lowest tier. So yeah, there's really nothing to say. If you don't play Minecraft, you've probably never even heard of the mouse. Now we have a beautiful mouse, a gift from God, the Xtrfy MZ1 Zeiss Rail. My experience with the wired version has honestly been pretty bad. Both of my copies had some insane rattling, but once I got the wireless MZ1, which is a bit pricey at $120, I actually was really impressed with the build quality. It's a great shape for fingertip, just a bit too heavy for what the mouse is, especially coming from Rocket Jump Ninja. A guy was like, lighter is better. But then he releases a mid 60 gram mouse with lots of RGB, and it's like, come on. But yeah, the switches and the wireless implementation are really solid. The wired version's in the C tier because I just don't recommend spending $80 on a wired mouse. That's likely going to have some QC issues. But yeah, moving on from that, we have the Pwnage Ultra Custom Symmetrical. This release kind of went under a lot of people's radars. I will throw this in the C tier. The cool thing about this mouse is that it has an adjustable sensor position. You can like raise the sensor up or lower it down depending on your preference, which is a cool feature, but the mouse itself is like a brick, just not the highest quality product. But the mouse itself has a very blocky shape. The weight is in the mid 80 gram range, so it's just not a really outstanding mouse, I guess. Next up, we have the Lamzu Atlantis, which absolutely is an outstanding mouse. This is the most recent mouse I reviewed, and it is a banger. If you are a fan of the XM1, maybe even pre-ordered the XM2W, this is a mouse to look into. It's like a modified version of the XM1 shape, a bit more centralized hump, but it's 55 grams, wireless, has a 3395 sensor, and is only $90. Like, the full package is really one of those mice that's like almost too good to be true, and there's really not a single aspect of the Atlantis that I think is seriously lacking. So it's a mouse that really sets the standard for what a based wireless mouse should be. Next up, the Deathadder V3 Pro, another based mouse. This has honestly been my main with the hyper polling dongle, like, since its release. The shape for some reason is just goated. It's a good ergo shape, which is not something I often say. It's not like the former Deathadders, definitely a lot more like a Zowie EC1 than the original Deathadder, but they have the Razer optical switches, obviously the Focus Pro 3950 sensor, best on the market. Just overall, the mouse has been a joy to use. Side mounts are perfect as well. And combining the large Deathadder shape with the low 60 gram, like really well balanced weight, it just feels extremely good in the hand in a way that not many ergo mice do. Next up, we have the Kone XP. Going in the dog shit Minecraft tier, this is a dog shit mouse, and it's also a Minecraft mouse, so it's like a 2-for-1. Actually, we gotta put it at the front of the tier. Now we have the Pulsar X2 and X2 Mini, which are both going to be going in the base tier. The Pulsar X2 series is Pulsar's first like serious ambi mouse. They had been making iterations of the X-Lite shell forever, but then they dropped the X2s, which both have 3395 sensors. The X2 Mini, I would say, is one of the best mice for fingertip, like that you can actually just go out and buy at any time, and also a really good mouse if you're into small shapes for claw grip. It's not like a Viper Mini, but if you like gripping a Viper Mini, you'll probably be cool with the shape of the X2 Mini. The medium-sized X2 is a great option for claw grip, depending on what type of shape you prefer. If you're looking for something rounded, like a GPX Superlight, it's not going to be for you because it has very flat sides and just sort of a blocky feeling in hand. But at $95, both the mini and the medium are pretty banger mice in the low 50 gram weight range. Next up is the Basilisk V3 Pro, which is basically a G502 clone. I'm honestly not a fan of mice like this at all. It has all of Razer's like top tier specs in it, but it is 115 grams, 112 grams or something. So it's quite a heavy bloke. And I just don't understand why somebody would use this for FPS, even over something like a $30 Viper Mini. But if you play MOBAs or something that requires just tons of side buttons, I mean, it's an option and the specs are solid, but I would never like go out and recommend a G502 style mouse for FPS. Next up is the Vaxee XE, which is a mouse Vaxee recently released. It is still wired, but it has a detachable cable, which is just a total troll. The mouse has an emoji button, which is definitely its saving grace. Other than that, it's a pretty large ambi shape, sort of inspired by the GPX mixed with the FK1, so good for relaxed style grips. But it's not a mouse that I really strongly recommend. $70, you are getting good quality and solid performance, but it is a wired mouse with a pretty large shape that I didn't find to be too good. Personally, but I know some people will like fall in love with the shape. Next up is the NP01 series, including the NP01S, obviously, which is, in my opinion, Vaxee's best mouse. There are two shapes. One of them is a pretty high profile, bulky shape, and the other one is the NP01S, which is a lot shorter. The click tensioning is also insane, and it's just one of the highest quality feeling mice on the market. I would say it gets just an edge over the XE because of the shape improvement, in my opinion. And then the Vaxee Outset AX, which is a shape that I never really loved because it's just a very high profile ergo. It's kind of like a squished down EC where it's going to be taller and also shorter. So it has just a very aggressive feeling in your hand. It's good for tilt grip styles. Just one of those ergos that if you're into ergos, you kind of ought to try, but if you're not into ergos, it'll probably just feel like a giant plump in your hand. The one caveat with those Vaxee mice is the cable, so if you're fine with upgrading the cable, or if you're just okay with using the pretty poor stock cable, they're definitely like top tier mice. Next up is going to be the Roccat Burst Pro, the Burst Pro Air, which is kind of confusing because the wired version is better than the wireless version. It's a lot cheaper, it's significantly lighter. For some reason they decided to prioritize RGB on the wireless version of this mouse. Where is it? I mean, I think it belongs in the C tier. It's in the mid 80 gram range versus the mid 60s on the wired version, which was released a year prior. So it was really an unimpressive release from Roccat. In my opinion, they should make like a Burst Pro Air Pro and throw in a 3395 sensor, and that would probably redeem them. Maybe make a mini version as well. Isn't there something like the Burst Core as well? Oh yeah, here it is. The Burst Core was a $30 version of the Burst Pro, and it had a rubber cable and I think worse stock skates, so it's honestly not worth buying anymore, especially considering the fact that the Burst Pro is always on a sale for under $50. So yeah, that's where that series goes. Next up is the Gamebitions Orbit, which I'm going to throw in dog shit. They somehow managed to release a mouse in 2022 that was worse than the original G305, which it's like a clone of, so it was really not too impressive. The Orbit is technically lighter than the G305, but in every other way, like the quality, the actual performance of the mouse, especially the side buttons, I remember those being horrific. It's just not a good mouse. I would be surprised if there's one person in the comment section who truly mains the Gamebitions Orbit. Next up, the glorious Model I. I'm not sure if this is a Minecraft mouse or not. I'll throw it in the C tier, honestly. It's basically Glorious's take on a lightweight G502. They have 4 side buttons. The side button design is like really bad. They just have the normal 2 side buttons, and then they put a third one down here, and then like a sniper button for the thumb. So it was kind of a troll, but it is one of the lightest mice that has 3 side buttons at like 67 grams, if I recall correctly. So it's not terrible, but it's not a serious like top tier mouse in my opinion. But it was something unique from Glorious, which, you know, as a brand, they just don't generally do. Next up, we have the Razer Viper V2 Pro. This is going to go in the base tier right alongside the Deathadder V3 Pro. In terms of like the tech and specs, these mice are using the same. The only difference is the shape. And in my opinion, the weak point of the Viper V2 Pro is the shape. It's just pretty alright in my opinion for claw grip. It's a very low profile and flat shape. Everybody knows what the Viper Ultimate shape is like, but it's the improvements they made besides that to the tech, the weight, removing the right-hand side buttons, removing the side grips, improving the switches. It's all around just an insanely good mouse. I do just wish it was a more optimized shape for claw grip. That's why, of course, so many people are holding on for dear life with the Viper Mini Wireless, expecting it to be something great, and low-key, I do think it will be. But yeah, moving on from that is the GPX, and what more do I need to say? It's the GPX. Do I have to do another tier list where I shill the GPX? Like, everybody knows by now, it is the standard. It released in December of 2020, and like every mouse since then has just been trying to like match the quality, the weight, and the performance of it. But yeah, since the GPX is so established as an incredibly good performing mouse, I do think that Logitech could make it even better by doing something similar to what Razer did with 4K Hertz polling rate. I don't know if they'd need to make a new model, maybe give it USB-C as well. But yeah, they could definitely make a refreshed GPX, and that would still be at the top of the gaming mouse food chain, which is where you want to be on this tier list, folks. Make sure to leave a like and sub if you haven't already. I feel like a radio host. Now we have the Delux M800 Pro. I don't know. This is like low B tier. It's like high C tier, low B tier. They really didn't change much from the original M800. They just gave it a 3370 sensor. Honestly, yeah, it's gonna be in C tier, because when I made my video, I got so many comments that apparently the Chinese version of the M800 Pro actually did feature more updates. But I still don't see that being the case, so I don't know. The M800 Pro is pretty underwhelming to me. The original M800 with the 3335 sensor was good back in its time as a budget mouse, but I don't think the updated one really offers enough improvements to be on par with some of the 3395 mice that are getting available for a pretty cheap price. One of them is the Fantech Aria, which I'm going to put at the top of the A tier. Honestly, like, could be low based, high A tier. It's hard to tell because this is basically an improved Razer Orochi. It's a slightly larger version of the Orochi shape. So I do think the shape will work for more people's hands. I heard a lot of complaints that the Orochi just felt too small for people who have even medium, but especially large size hands. So the Aria has a 3395, is only $70. I'll be the first to say that the click and just overall quality of the mouse is not on the same level as the GPX, but it's very solid, and it is my go-to recommendation for a budget and wireless mouse that's still going to perform extremely well. Next up is the Titan GE Air Wireless from Xenics. This is a mouse that probably not a lot of people saw my review of. It is just a wireless clone of the Cooler Master MM720 shape. Oh yeah, that is also on this tier list. I would put that in the D tier. I'll get back to the MM720, but the GE Air Wireless is just a clone from Korea. I paid $110, which for the mouse I received was honestly too much money. You can only get it on eBay if you're in the US, and it's just not great quality-wise. The weight and the wireless, it feels nice, and the shape is really unique. You can see the right side, like, ring finger rest. Your hand just fits in it like no other mouse, but I don't think it's a great mouse. But yeah, now getting to the MM720, I just checked and it is $30 on Amazon, and I feel like it has to go in C tier. It's not a good mouse. I mean, it's a good mouse. It's not a great mouse. The cable is decent at best, and just like a wired mouse in 2022, I wouldn't recommend anybody to go out and buy it, but the weight and just the overall experience is unique for the price, and nobody's buying a Cooler Master mouse expecting it to be something great, so I feel like I can put it in the C tier. Never mind, it just started giving D tier. Next up, we have the Asus Tuf Air, which is a 47-gram wired mouse from Asus, definitely giving C tier. I mean, there's nothing great about it. The shape has very flat sides, feels sort of like the GPX, but I just remember it having pretty low quality buttons besides the main clicks. The stock feet weren't great. The wire was not good at all. I think on the thumbnail I put it like in a landfill. I made an e-waste joke in the video. So that's not a great mouse, but they did get the weight somewhat low, so congrats Asus on that. Did it have really bad side grips too? My memory's fading. I don't even know. But next up we have the HSK Plus from Gwolves. This is a fingertip grip mouse, so it's not going to have a back hump that you can claw grip whatsoever. It's only made for fingertip, but it actually does have side buttons. Unfortunately, the side buttons are like maybe the size of my thumbnail combined, so you can't really hit both of them while playing a game like Fortnite. So it's like, in theory the mouse has side buttons, but in practice you don't really have two side buttons that you can access at the same time. The weight is around 40 grams though, which just feels so insane for fingertip grip. It feels just like a little ball in your hand. It's extremely easy to control, super good for like vertical tracking. But the mouse is pretty expensive, and in my original batch copy had a terrible right click issue, but I would presume Gwolves fix that for the batches they sell now. I think it's like $110 or something, which is definitely a bit of money, but they justify it by saying it's a niche mouse for like only fingertip grip using mouse enthusiasts, so they can't really produce as many. But if you are looking for a fingertip grip mouse, besides the HSK and the M2K, you don't have any options as far as I know. Next up is the Razer Viper Mini, definitely going in base tier. This has been my go-to like budget mouse recommendation forever. It's $30. It's iconic. It's the Viper Mini. I don't feel like much more needs to be said. I feel like I've sold thousands of these to just kids on TikTok. Whenever they ask, like, what mouse should I get? I'm like, you're on TikTok, you're probably a kid, probably have small hands. Just go with a Viper Mini, man. It's only $30. And I've never heard a single person complain about the purchase. The most common complaint is the LOD issue, since it's using a very budget-end sensor. I don't even know which sensors. But there are plenty of fixes for the LOD issue, and it does not take away from the fact that the mouse was just so far ahead of its time with optical switches, low 60-gram weight, a good cable, good stock skates, and only $30. Like, it's just crazy how, like, insane it was. It's crazy how insane it was. You guys are watching some high IQ content. Now we have the Razer Viper Ultimate. I would put this, like, probably high B tier. It's not on the same crazy sale that it was when the Viper V3 Pro first dropped. It's around $100 for the mouse with the dock now, and I just don't recommend buying that over the V2 Pro. It's kind of in the same situation that the old G Pro Wireless was, so I think I'm going to put this in the dog shit tier to send the same message I sent with the G Pro Wireless. Like, just go with the newer model. The charging dock, nobody cares. It does not matter that you can no longer put your mouse on a dock. Grow up, plug it in. That's what I have to say about that, and the V2 Pro is just such a better mouse in every way. Now the Viper 8K Hertz, I know it just says Viper, but it's the Viper 8K Hertz, definitely going to be in the B tier. Yes, it's the best performing mouse, but it is just the old Viper shell. The only thing it really has going for it is that it is a widely available, pretty affordable 8K Hertz mouse. 8K polling rate does tend to have issues in games. I've had a better experience with Razer's 4K Hertz wireless. Obviously, you can just turn down the polling rate on the wired one. But yeah, it's not something I'm widely recommending, but for what it is, it's pretty good. Now we have the Beardedbob GPX, absolute legend. If you haven't watched a Beardedbob mouse modding video, you need to get your life together and just go do that. Beardedbob is an absolute legend who just does terrible things to mice, and he made a GPX for me. It looks like an abomination, but it was absolutely goated, so that's going in the base tier. Check him out if you have not already. Now the Dornfinger Vino S. This is a mouse that I'm probably going to put in D tier. Just a wired mouse, side buttons on both sides, Huano switches. I think it came with Tiger Ices, the stock skates. That was one cool thing about it, but other than that, it's like a somewhat G Pro wireless inspired shape and nothing to write home about. Now the Fnatic Bolt, kind of just like a mid mouse. It was somewhat hyped when it released, but I remember my review of it was not extremely positive. It just kind of felt like a decent mouse. I just can't string together any strong words about the Fnatic Bolt. If anything, it probably belongs in a C tier along with the Burst Pro Air. I think it's on like the same wavelength as that. And the main problem was just that nothing felt especially good about the mouse. The side buttons were dismal, the coding was really bad, the main button implementation wasn't that good, the 3370 sensor was a 3370 sensor, and yeah, the mouse just wasn't too unique. And I do think it's available for either $80 or $90, but I would strongly recommend getting a Lamzu Atlantis or a Pulsar X2 over it if you are in that price range. Next up are all of Glorious's wireless mice, which use the same tech. They do have some mice, like the Pro versions, in group buy, but those are just literally using the same specs as their standard line, just around 10 grams lighter. So I do not get the hype at all of the Glorious Pro mice. They're standard mice. They're decent budget mice. You're not going to be getting the best of the best quality from Glorious. But for example, the Model D- wireless is just not a bad small ergo mouse. The Model O- wireless, not worth buying at all. Model O wireless, definitely not worth getting if you can afford a Viper V2 Pro, and the Model D standard size, just go with a Deathadder V3 Pro over it. The other Glorious mice, the wired ones, they seem to be getting really popular in the Minecraft scene, so I guess they will go in the Minecraft tier. Apparently I have an extra Model O wireless, oh heavens, I guess I'll just put that in the Minecraft tier as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Glorious's new mouse. They do have that one, the Series 1 Pro or whatever, that's a different shape. So that could be cool, but still not a $33.95 sensor. It's hard to release a mouse like that in today's market, folks. Next up, the Hati S Wireless, going to be going in A tier. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be asking about the Hati S Plus, the 4K version. I have that, and Gwolves told me it's a no-go on reviewing it as of now, so I'm not sure if I can speak on it. I can say that there are not any massive issues on this copy. They're using zippy 60M switches. The 4K implementation seems to be solid, and the mouse is 50 grams with a modified shape from the original Hati. So I would imagine that it's going to wind up in either based or the A tier, but what you got to realize is the mouse is $170 for the 4K version. So that is a fuck ton of money for a Gwolves mouse, and the Hati S Wireless I think is available for around $110, so it's just not a bad small mouse for claw grip. It does have holes as opposed to a solid shell, 1K hertz polling rate, so it's not as good as the improved version, but still Hati S Wireless solid mouse. I just wouldn't recommend it over a GPX, for example. Ninjutsu Katana Superlight, this is a mouse that's going to go in C tier. If you like the shape, this could definitely be argued into the A tier potentially, but I found it to be one of the worst shapes I've used on a modern mouse because it's essentially a one-to-one clone of a old Microsoft mouse. I think the IntelliMouse 1.1a. If I'm wrong though, some boomer's gonna be coming for my head. Besides the shape, the Katana Superlight is not bad. The quality of it and the specs were solid, which gives me hope for Ninjutsu's next mouse, which they recently announced. I think it's called the Sora. I don't know when that's dropping, but it will likely be better than the Katana Superlight and have a 3395. Now the M4 Wireless, another mouse I'm going to put in the C tier. It honestly could go in the B tier. For a wireless ergo, it's not bad. The shape is pretty polarizing, I would say. It has a super aggressive curve on the left side, but the top of the mouse is flat like you would see on an Ambi mouse. So it's a unique ergo shape. It doesn't have the highest overall quality feeling. I just don't feel like Xtrfy products have that like tier 1 mouse feeling. The mouse in general isn't bad, but I would definitely recommend something like a Deathadder V3 Pro over it, even though this is a vastly different shape. Next up, the Xm1r. And now talk about a tragedy. I did not think when I made my last tier list in February that in September there would still not be a wireless XM1. The amount of delays that have been on the XM2W is actually like horrifying. Obviously the XM1 is still a great mouse. Enough has been said about it. Very high quality, one of the best cables on a wired mouse, one of the best coatings, just insane quality feeling in hand. Everybody knows about the mouse. It's just the fact that Endgame has not released a wireless version, which is insane. So inshallah, the XM2W pre-orders will ship out, but until then, it's kind of disappointing that this is like the only product Endgame has released in 2 or 3 years. Well, only mouse, I should say. Next up is the Cooler Master MM731. I hate this thing. This is going in, honestly, should be in dog shit. This is some personal bias. I just hated the mouse. When I first got it, it had this horrible issue with the wireless implementation where there was so much noticeable input lag, and they didn't fix that for a while. Eventually they did fix it, and the mouse still isn't any good. It has bad optical switches, the weight balancing's off, it's a super awkward shape that flares out too much at the bottom for the general size of the mouse. Did I mention the weight balancing was bad? It's just, I hate the mouse, man. I don't like Cooler Master mice. Next up, the Gamesense MVP Wireless. I would say this could go in the C tier, up in the C tier though. It's 75 grams, which is definitely the one part of this mouse that I feel is kind of behind. The MVP is a shape inspired by the Microsoft WMO, and unlike the Katana Superlight, it's not a bad shape feeling of an old Microsoft mouse. The one thing about this mouse is it's 75 grams. It is on the larger side, but you would think it could definitely be a bit lighter. But I think this mouse uses kills for all the switches, kill 4.0s maybe, and they're just solid. And with the 3370 sensor, good build quality, it's not a bad mouse, but it's just not a special mouse either in my opinion. Next up is the Shroud G303 from Logitech, and I'll put this at the top of the B tier. Could be in the A tier or even the base tier if you really love the shape of it. But I've always found the G303 like diamond shape to be a bit awkward. They did update the Shroud version's shape from the original version, making it a bit larger, and the G303 is just a shape that you are going to love or hate. Obviously, since it's a Logitech mouse, the build quality and specs were on point. It was a bit heavy. Shroud said that he chose to make the mouse a bit heavier because that's what he preferred, I think. But yeah. So yeah, personally, I was never able to hop on the G303 hype train, but I do understand that it's a solid mouse for people who enjoy the shape. Next up, the Pwnage Symm 2. I would say this is solid in B tier. This is the closest thing on the market right now to a wireless Viper Mini shape. Pretty close shape to the M800 Pro, but a bit higher profile. And at $110 for a mouse with a 3370, it's definitely overpriced from Pwnage, and I would recommend waiting for the Viper Mini Wireless if you are interested in that, but it's a solid wireless mouse for sure. Never mind, it turns out the Sim 2 is actually on a sale for $80, which is a completely reasonable price, and that will bump it up to the A tier. The weight is nothing insane, it's in the low 70s, but yeah, definitely a good mouse if you're looking for the Viper Mini-esque shape in wireless. Now the Fantech XD5, this was a mouse that really wasn't impressive. I'd say it's in the high D tier. It had some sensor issues at the start. I think they ironed those out with firmware updates, but in general, it's just a really awkward mini ergo shape that I was not able to claw grip personally with larger hands, and the weight was not too incredible, nor the main switch implementation, so it just wasn't a great mouse, which made the Fantech Aria even more insane because that actually was a good mouse from Fantech. It's crazy, a company improving over time. Now we have the Pulsar X-Lite V2 Wireless. I would say this goes in the A tier. It's an ergo mouse that I was never able to really love because of just the overall shell feeling and the bad side buttons. But for $80, it's a really good value, under 60 grams, 3370 sensor. It is a very OEM, like just EC shell. I definitely prefer the overall experience on the Deathadder V3 Pro, but the X-Lite is practically half the price. So definitely a mouse that's in the A tier. Next up, the Arox 3 Wireless. This is just not a good mouse. I'm going to throw it in the D tier. $100 for a 3335. The terrible side buttons. Just the like SteelSeries makes shapes that just have so many like sharp angles that mice should not have, and they never feel good. This is a prime example of that. Damn, like the SteelSeries Prime. What a segue that was. I would say the Prime Wireless could definitely go either high C tier or low B tier. It should actually be criminal that SteelSeries charges $130 for the Prime and the Prime Mini Wireless, though. Like, you could get a GPX for that price, or you could get an 80-gram awkward shape from SteelSeries with a last gen sensor, actually like multiple generations ago. Just think about that. So yeah, no love for SteelSeries mice. Now we have the Starlight and the new Starlight 10s edition. Wait a minute, my head is blocking the tier list. That is no good. Okay, things should be good now, but yeah, the 10 Starlight I would say is a slight step up from all of the previous Starlights, but it's not really a massive difference. The Infinity skins are definitely a nice add-on and at least gives you some added value for $190, which is definitely the most expensive mouse in the base tier. But the Starlights are legendary. They were the first sub 50 gram wireless mice. I've really had a great overall experience with my 6 units now. Granted, a few of them were sent out, but the 10s one I bought is perfect as well. And since they continued to improve them and produce more over time, I feel like the Final Mouse hate kind of dissipated, because if people wanted one, they could get one from the drops. I think like nearly 100K were made. So yeah, Starlights are definitely based, and I always keep one on my desk. Next up, the Air 58. I mean, if you are still using an Air 58 from like 2018, God bless your soul. I don't think you should be buying an Air 58 aftermarket to be using it now. There's no point. Granted, it is the last version of the large Final Mouse shape, but the new medium Starlights I would say are much better than the wired Air 58. So generally avoid that. The Ultralight 2, I would say, is in the B tier, because this you can actually get for a reasonable price, around $100. It's the same shape as the small Starlight, but obviously wired and around 10 grams heavier, but I still have my Ultralight 2 still in good condition. But it's not something I'm really saying go out and spend $100 on, but if you do play fingertip and want a small mouse, and for some reason if you can't afford the small Starlight, it's definitely something you could settle on. The Cox CM600, this is a dogshit mouse, just an egg-shaped OEM clone. This just had really bad buttons and a bad cable and bad stock skates and a bad shape, just bad everything when I tested it. Nobody probably knew about that mouse. I feel like it's just unnecessary to just hate on so many mice like the CM600, the Darmo Shark N1. Like, what even are these mice? Apparently I've reviewed them in the past, but yeah, pretty bad all around. These are just like shitty OEM mice from, I think, 2020. So yeah, no point in really buying them. The Deathadder V2 Mini, that's another mouse that I'm going to put in dog shit. The old Deathadder shape was not meant to be scaled down as much as it was on the mini version. I remember the cable being a hindrance as well. And when I tested it, it was just such like a bizarre small shape that was just not made for large hands. I think if the Deathadder V3 shape was scaled down, that would make a much better mini mouse. But yeah, the V2 Mini was pretty shit. Okay, new day, same tier list. Next up is the Razer Deathadder V2 Pro. And I'm definitely going to throw this high C tier because unlike the Viper Ultimate, it is not the exact same shape as the Deathadder V3 Pro. So if you do like the old Deathadder shape, this is honestly the best mouse you're going to get with that tech in it. And it's currently on a sale for $70, and at that price, it's really not a bad mouse. The one thing that's pretty meh about it is the weight in the high 80-gram range, but if you do get like glass skates or just even Tiger Ice, it will make it feel a lot better. So it's a solid wireless ergo mouse for like $70. Next up are the Vaxee Mice, or not Vaxee, Zowie. Easy to get them confused, and I would say the EC series, S2 series, and ZA series is going to go in A tier. The FK, I'm going to put it in B tier. I've just never been a fan of the actual FK mice from Zowie. I feel like there are plenty of wireless clones that give you pretty much the same experience, but just slightly better overall. With all of the other Zowie mice, there actually are not like many clones. For example, the ZA, there's not a single one-to-one clone of any of the ZA shapes. The S1 and S2, there's a lot of shapes that take inspiration from them. They generally have lower quality feelings, like all of those Pwnage Symm mice were just basically an S2 shell. But still, there is just something about using a Zowie mouse where you can notice that really high quality feeling, even though they're wired mice. That's why they're still in the A tier. And yeah, the C series, around 70 grams with the updated cable. Like, they're not bad mice to use whatsoever, but Zowie has to go wireless. It's getting like comical at this point. 3395s, 3399s are out. Like, what are they waiting for? It's really a great question. We'll see by the next tier list if Zowie has gone wireless. Now the G203, I'm going to throw this in the B tier. This is a mouse that like I used to put in the base tier, but over the years just started using it less. It became a bit more outdated, and I don't really recommend people to go out and spend $30 on a wired mouse with a rubber cable and shitty stock skates. It's also over 80 grams, so on paper, the G203 is really nothing special, but it's just such an iconic shape that once you mod it, in my opinion, it's definitely a better mouse than the standard G305. You might think this is a wireless version of the same shape, it should be better, but in my experience, across like 5 G305 copies at this point, the main switches, the Omron 10Ms, and the side button switches are just so shit in comparison to the G203 that it actually makes like a noticeable difference, along with the weight balancing being worse on the G305, but you can slightly fix that by swapping out the battery. But yeah, next up is the Logitech G402. I mean, honestly, has anybody ever bought this mouse on their own free will? I feel like it became super popular in Fortnite when Mongrel used it, but aside from that, like, it's just a worse G502 basically. Okay, next up is the G502. I'm actually using the G502X Plus right now, or is it, no, just the X, not the Plus. I don't get the RGB. And I would definitely say that this new model is improved compared to the G502 Lightspeed. One thing, they have new Light Force switches, which are Logitech's opticals, and these truly feel one-to-one with the Omron 20Ms they used to use. So that's crazy. Be on the lookout for my review. It's honestly not like too massively different than the standard G502. I'll put the old one in the C tier. This would probably be in B tier. Since it is 100 grams, it still is definitely like a brick, but it's getting light by G502 standards, as all the scroll wheel functionality, the side buttons, blah, blah. But yeah, that's the G502. Next up is the G Pro Hero, but it's actually going to be the Logitech G703 because I realized I don't have a picture for that. So this is the G703, which is going to go in B tier. Again, Logitech needs to make a G703 Superlight kind of catch up to Razer with that wireless ergo with top tier tech. But the standard G703 still is not bad at all. They're on a pretty big sale all the time, and it's a solid ergo mouse, just not the lightest, not most up to date. G Pro Wireless, no point in buying this when the G Pro Superlight is out, honestly. Like, there's no way you have enough money for a G Pro Wireless, but not enough for a Superlight. And if you do, put in some hard work and dedication and get yourself a G Pro Superlight. Just, it's 2022, stop buying Viper Ultimates and old G Pro Wirelesses. That's the motto. Next up is the HyperX Pulsar Haste. Let's say this is the Pulsar Haste Wireless. It's going to go in the C tier. It honestly was a miss from HyperX, waiting to release it for a long time and only putting in a 3335 sensor and not making any improvements. I did see that they're coming out with a Pro version that is still using a 3335. What is wrong with HyperX? But yeah, the Pulsar Haste, the wired one, is a solid budget mouse. The wireless one, it's just kind of in a weird place where I don't recommend it. Next up is the wired Hati S from Gwolves, and I'll put this in the low B tier. What used to be very expensive for a wired mouse. I think it retailed for $90, but over time, as Gwolves has started to mainly focus on wireless mice, the price has gone down. So a mouse is below 50 grams. Of course, it's wired, and the shell and click quality may not hold up forever, knowing that it's a old Gwolves mouse. But yeah, really nothing bad to say about the Hati S wired. If you can't afford the wireless one, I guess it is an option. And now the Hati M, this is going to go in the C tier. There's really no reason to buy a wired G Pro wireless clone. Definitely, as is the case with 90% of the mice, C tier and below, you're better off just getting a GPX. I also made the Hati M wireless, which I tried and I think I reviewed, and it just was nothing impressive either. It was around 60 grams, and I was just thinking, why would I use this over a Superlight? It was around the same price, had a 3370, so it just didn't make much sense. Now the Hello Kitty mouse. I remember buying this mouse on Etsy in 2019, so it just wasn't a good mouse then, definitely is not a good mouse now, and it's unfortunately broken. I wonder if I still have it. Now the Gwolves HSK, this is the wired version. It does not have even the idea of side buttons on it. It does have a scroll wheel, but there's no reason in buying really a wired fingertip mouse, especially considering the fact that it's the same weight as the wireless version. So I would definitely recommend just waiting or saving up for the HSK Plus if you want any iteration of the Gwolves HSK. Now the Roccat Kone 200, absolute Minecraft mouse. The Roccat Kone Pure Ultra. This is a mouse that kind of just fell out of relevancy. When I first started making reviews, it was really hype. It was the shape that you either loved or hated. It had the best coating I've ever felt on a mouse. A really interesting shape for claw grip. It did have a rubber wire, so you kind of had to mod the mouse. But yeah, Roccat just has not capitalized and made a wireless version, which is really cringe to me. Next up is the Xtrfy M42 Wireless. I tried this mouse. It's not a bad weight. It has a 3370 sensor. One thing that kind of just bothers me with Xtrfy mice is just all of the holes and the generally low quality feeling with the buttons. The shape itself of the M42 is really nice, especially with the mini ZA style hump. So it's a good shape for claw grip. Overall, a solid mouse, but I do wish Xtrfy would make a solid shell version with a 3395, focus on weight, and then make one of the best claw grip mice on the market, as opposed to something that's kind of trying to appeal to both casuals and enthusiasts at the same time. Next up, Xtrfy M4 Wired. Gonna throw this in the C tier. Pretty self-explanatory if you watch my M4 Wireless explanation. Now the Matar mouse. I truly forget a lot about this mouse, aside from the fact that it was $30, had a 3389 sensor, and I thought it was a decent budget mouse, but then the quality went to shit in 2 days, which is to be expected of cheap OEM mice on Amazon. Now the SteelSeries Arox 5. This is one of those mice that has 3 side buttons. It's not too light, it's not too great. Sounds like an average SteelSeries product. It could go in D tier, C tier, depending on what you think of it, but it was pretty mid. Now the HK Gaming Mira S. Man, remember when HK Gaming made mice? Those were all pretty shit. Now the Cooler Master MM710. This is a pretty dry tear. I would say the MM710 goes in D tier. Just the quality of these is so abysmal. I saw that there were leaks of a wireless version, but I just don't know what happened with that. Cooler Master's not making it. These things are available for cheap as fuck at Walmart and Amazon, so if you only have $20, actually no, Viper Mini is on sale for $20. Just go get that. There is no reason you should be buying an MM710. Next up is the HK Gaming Naus M, which was their take on the Zowie S2, and it was not a good take on the Zowie S2. It had, what was it, it just had bad everything. I remember my review of the Naus M might have been one of the most negative on my channel. Next up are the Rival 310 and Rival 600, 2 mice from SteelSeries that are massively outdated bricks with shitty rubber cables. There are gonna be people in my comments oh, but the shape. And that is, of course, massive coping, but if you're using a SteelSeries mouse to begin with, you're probably coping. Now, the Gwolves Skull Mini. I'm going to throw this in the C tier. If you're looking for a mini ergo mouse, this is one of the better options. It's really cheap now. I would not say the quality is nearly as good as something like the Zowie EC3C, but if you're just looking for an extremely lightweight mini ergo, the Skull Mini is an option at under $50. Next up is the standard Gwolves Skull, which is a much larger mouse than the Skull Mini. It's kind of a mouse that Gwolves has just left behind. It would be interesting to see them make a solid shell wireless version of either of their ergo shapes, but yeah, I don't really recommend buying the large Skull Mini, or no, the large Skull Wired in 2022. It's just not going to be a great quality experience. Ton of holes. These buttons just don't really have great tensioning compared to today's standards. So yeah, next up is the Roccat Kone Pro Air, and I'll throw this in low A tier. The Kone Pro Air is one of the better ergos for claw grip on the market. The Kone Pro Air is one of the better wireless ergos for claw grip on the market. It's not the lightest mouse, but it's still in the mid-70s range if I remember correctly. It has optical switches, great stock skates, and the overall experience is great on the Kone Pro Air. I did have a QC issue with my scroll wheel, but I'm pretty sure that was just a one-off thing and won't affect every copy, of course. But yeah, just overall, really solid quality mouse, not too outrageously priced. I think it's around $100. Next up is the Atom Palm Hydrogen, and this has been in every tier list for multiple years, and no joke, it actually dropped the other day, but I fucking missed the drop. It was available for $100. Everybody knows Atom Palm, 8K hertz, below 50 grams, shape made for palm grip, and I just cannot believe I did not manage to cop one, so I'm angry and I'm putting in the dog shit tier, and that's that. Next up is the Quadraclicks M1K. The M2K is the more updated model. They don't even sell the M1K anymore, so I don't know where I would put the M1K. I think I just got to throw both of them in based, because these are the original fingertip grip mice. The M1K, of course, had no scroll wheel or side button, so it literally was just a box with clicks and a pretty bad rubber wire. The M2K, they added a scroll wheel, just made some overall improvements, but still kept the rubber wire, which is what really stopped me from using it personally, along with the shape and lack of side buttons. So really, I've always had a lot of problems with these Quadraclicks mice, but they're just so based. Like, they're charging $350 just for a small carbon fiber mouse, and if that doesn't put you in the base tier, I don't know what does. They're also, without a doubt, the lightest mice on the market, with the M2K weighing in at, I believe, 22 or 23 grams, so it's just stupid how light they are. And some people who fingertip grip swear by them, but they've never just been a mainstay for me. I'm really looking forward to whatever Quadraclicks comes up with next, though. Now, the Razer Orochi V2, I'm going to throw this in A tier. As I said before, in my opinion, it's not as good of a mouse as the Fantech Aria. It's using a lower-end sensor. I've had problems with the overall shell quality over time, but for $45, the Orochi is definitely not a bad mouse for people with small or medium-sized hands. It uses a replaceable battery, so if you do use a AAA battery, I believe it's around 66 grams, so it's not a heavy mouse by any means. It's a better buy than the G305 in my opinion. It has Bluetooth as well, which is a nice feature. It's made to be a mouse like on the go that can also be a good mouse for gaming, so yeah, definitely A tier. Next up is the Razer Naga. I don't know why I keep putting these in the tier list. I've never used it, which might be crazy. Like, I've used all of these mice, but never a Razer Naga. Maybe if they make like a V3 Pro version, I'll try it out. But yeah, I don't have anything to say. I've never used the mouse. Next up, the Vancer Gretxa. Where does this go? I'd say this goes like high C tier at this point. There's not really much of a reason to buy a Starlight clone that weighs like 20 grams more, but Vancer's new mice do seem really promising. They're making both an Ambi and an Ergo, and they're going to be in the low 50 gram range with a 3395 sensor, so they'll definitely be a lot better than the Gretxa, which is a pretty old mouse at this point. I remember when I discovered it on Chinese eBay, and I was like, damn, this is the next big thing. But yeah. Next up are Piranha Mouse Mods mice, which I'm going to throw in the B tier. In theory, these should be in the base tier. It's a 3D printed mouse. It can be any shape you want. It's going to be a lower weight, but in like practice, these mice just don't have the same feeling. Like 3D printed parts just don't have the same feeling that the ABS injection molded plastic on the GPX does. So I'm somebody who does like the idea of 3D printed mice. I keep trying them and seeing the improvements over time, but it's nothing that I would really recommend over an established top tier mouse unless you're just looking for something to experiment with, really. What I do like about Piranha Mouse Mods, though, is that they sell mod kits separately, so you can actually put the mouse together yourself, and it's a lot cheaper than actually buying a pre-built, and you can use code BOARDSY to save 10% at Piranha Mouse Mods, which on the pre-builts is definitely saving a decent chunk of change. Now the Ninjutsu Origin 1X. Just gonna go in the C tier. The Origin 1X was Ninjutsu's first mouse. It had a 3335. It was a good weight, and the shape was inspired by the Microsoft IE 3.0. I would definitely say the shape was better than the Katana Superlight, but the overall quality and performance was probably a step down. But yeah, overall the Origin 1X was not a terrible mouse, just not something I would really recommend buying in today's economy. Next up, or last but not least I should say, is the Quadraclicks RBT. This is one of the most stupid mouse designs ever. They basically just raised up the clicks because apparently that is going to save your hands from, I think RSI was the main injury that they were trying to prevent. It's basically this mouse that is built up on pseudoscience, or maybe it's real science, who knows. But I just know that it was an absolutely garbage mouse to use for gaming, but they did send it out for free, so I do respect that. But yeah, that is going to be all for the updated 2022 all-encompassing gaming mouse tier list. So yeah, this is going to be the final list. As always, make sure to let me know what you think, what you disagree with. There's always a lot of hatred in the comments, and everything's good for the algorithm, you know me, man. But yeah, in all seriousness, I hope you guys enjoyed this Netflix mini-series length video about gaming mice. Lots of new additions to the base tier, lots of new based mice, and that's really all I have to say. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in around 6 months for another updated 2023 tier list.